The Penn State Nittany Lions capped off an 11-2 top 10 bounce back of a season with a 5-game win streak, which included a Rose Bowl victory against a top 10 Utah team by a score of 35-21. The question now is, can the Nittany Lions ride the momentum? Can they use their returning production, transfer portal additions, and impact freshman additions to their advantage and punch their first ever ticket to the college football playoff? And if you say no, that's impossible because of James Franklin or because of these other reasons, may I mind you, there is a coach in the Big Ten East who was once viewed as inferior to Franklin, who's coming off of back-to-back Big Ten titles, back-to-back college football playoff appearances, and back-to-back dominant wins over Ohio State. And now, finally, after 2 years of that, Michigan is viewed as the Tier 1A, at minimum, to at most Tier 1, exclusively, of the Big Ten. Just like how it was in the 1990s, which was 2 decades ago. Michigan had that lull where they didn't do much and they were viewed as a second or third rate at best Big Ten team. And now they've returned back to the top. Penn State under Joe Paterno had many good teams in the 90s when they were in the Big Ten. Before then, as an independent, they won some national titles under him. They had some good teams in the 2000s, and James Franklin has produced a share of 11-win teams that if some things went the other way, Penn State might have found their way into the college football playoff. In 2016, they were one ranking away from it. They were perhaps a Washington or Clemson loss in their respective championship games away from making the college football playoff that year. Penn State in 2017 lost 2 games by a combined 4 points. In 2019, they lost to Minnesota, nearly came back against them on the road. If that changes, they would have finished 11-1, could have maybe vied for that 4th seed potentially if some chaos happened. And this past season in 2022, they were 9 minutes away in that game in Happy Valley against the Ohio State Buckeyes from Columbus, Ohio. They were 9 minutes away. If they hold on to that lead, if some things go their way, and I know if statements are essentially useless when talking about past things because they've happened, but there's nothing wrong with theorizing because it can give some perspective. And the perspective is Penn State multiple times has been close. The problem is they just haven't gotten over the hump. Now, I think the type of team that Penn State is when the 12-team playoff comes around, they'll make the 12-team playoff. But the reality is they have never been, under Franklin, a top 4 team, including every game they've played in. Like, for a whole season, or at the end of the season, they've never been a top 4 team. Michigan has. Ohio State has. Some might even argue Wisconsin under Paul Chryst was in 2017. Some might even argue Penn State's 2017 team was top 4. Again, unlike Ohio State, who won the Big Ten, they didn't get blown out by Iowa. And unlike Wisconsin, they played in the tougher division. So I say all that for 4 minutes just as kind of background noise to mention that Penn State has been close, and now there's another opportunity. They have another opportunity presented to them to potentially reach the college football playoff, potentially. And if they do, winning a college football playoff game is a completely different conversation, but just making it means that you are definitely a top 10 team. Like, no doubt about it. Making the college football playoff, no doubts about it, means you are a top 10 team. Indisputably a top 10 team. Probably more likely top 8 or top 6 if you come from the Big Ten East. Maybe even at worst, top 4. So, Penn State, they enter 2023 returning a lot of guys At wide receiver, they do lose Parker Washington, who's off to the NFL. Same with Mitchell Tinsley. They lose center Juice Scruggs, but they return most of their offensive line. They lose Brenton Strange at tight end. Sean Clifford, who's been with the program for 6 years and had his best year passing the ball in 2022. He's off after having the best game of his career in his final game. How fitting that be against Utah. That's what you're losing on offense. On offense, you're bringing in Dante Cephas on offense at wide receiver. You're also bringing in a wide receiver from Florida State whose name I forget, and trust me, I will learn these names the longer the preseason goes on. Wide receiver from Florida State. Cephas is more, downfield threat, receiving kind of guy. This other wide receiver, again, I forget his name, but he's from Florida State. He's not ranked as highly as Cephas, but from what I've heard, much better blocker, certainly an impact blocker, and all that's going to do is just help the run game, which is going to be fueled by Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, who now are going to be sophomores. The offense returns a lot. They return Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, who would action at tight end for a lot of the year, return their 2 starting running backs. Drew Allar he really got the J.J. McCarthy treatment, or in James Franklin's own words, he got rookie Aaron Rodgers treatment, where in James Franklin's analogy, and he used this because he worked with the Patriots when Brett Favre was there and Aaron Rodgers was under him, and they would, put Aaron Rodgers in positions and let him play to get some experience. Or, to look at my own team's terms and what Jim Harbaugh does at Michigan, Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy. J.J., and when they were down big against Georgia, J.J. was put in and was the starter for the rest of the game. Same thing with basically Drew Allar when it came down to playing against Michigan in the Big House this past season. So you have experience even at quarterback despite the loss of a returning starter. Now Drew Allar is going to be one of Penn State's bigger question marks. I think how he plays and how high to his ceiling or low to his floor that he plays will determine Penn State's season. Because we know how good Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are. The tight ends, despite the loss of Strange, Theo Johnson, huge. Tyler Warren, also, junior, has experience. And then the offensive line, you return the majority of your production there. Keandre Lambert-Smith comes back. You have a great wide receiver in Dante Cephas coming in. Liam Clifford, according to our lads, the younger brother of Sean Clifford, is the projected starting wide receiver, one of them, for 2023 in the slot position. This offense is loaded, and their offensive line, it might be one of the best, possibly the best, in the James Franklin era, especially with Olu Fashanu at left tackle and Hunter Norzad at offensive center. Landon Tengwall, who dealt with injuries for a lot of last year, if he's healthy, he should live up to his high 4-star ranking potential that we saw out of high school. There's just a lot of talent on this offense. And the biggest question mark outside of the wide receiver room, and again, you got a portal addition in Dante Cephas, and Keandre Lambert-Smith has had flashes for both 2021 and 22. The main question is quarterback. That's the main question. Can Drew Allar continue to compound upon Mike Yurcish's success here at Penn State? Clifford obviously progressing from 2021 to 2022. Can Drew Allar be a further progression? Will he be better than Clifford was last year? Or because he's a new starter, will he be a few steps back? Will he be in the same position? Because against Ohio State, with a D-line that features a mature JTT, who burned Penn State last year, single-handedly won Ohio State that game, Jack Sawyer on the other side there, and they return Mike Hall, who's a beast at defensive tackle. You need a quarterback who can make plays, who can maneuver out of the pocket, who doesn't need the system to carry him, because against a D-line and linebacker core of Ohio State, which the linebackers, Tommy Eichenberg, All-American, NFL caliber, Steel Chambers too, if he is, let's say, a Jake Fromm type of quarterback. Sack, punt, not beating Ohio State. And to the same point, if, his arm doesn't live up to what we all, think it is or has the potential to be out of high school, if the wide receiver room isn't there, then you're not going to beat a secondary like Michigan's that has Will Johnson, Makari Page, or their linebacker core with now Ernest Hausman, Junior Colson, and Michael Barrett. Because Michigan and Ohio State are truly the two teams that are keeping the Nittany Lions from the college football playoff. And I mainly look at things from the offensive perspective, like I just talked about the offensive depth chart, ran through all of that. On defense, there are a lot of losses. Nick Tarburton is gone. PJ Mustipher is gone. Jair Brown and Joey Porter Jr. are gone. But Kalen King, Keaton Ellis, Johnny Dixon, Daquan Hardy, Curtis Jacobs, Abdul Carter, like absolute great player at linebacker, Adisa Isaac, Danny Dennis Sutton will be a sophomore. You have talent there. And for all the flack that I gave Manny Diaz, especially after that Michigan game, and believe me, I don't think that, especially at the defensive line, Penn State is going to be at the level that Ohio State and Michigan are. But the linebacker play, outstanding. Secondary has maintained itself as one of the better secondaries and more disciplined NFL caliber secondaries in the nation. Because of the assistant coaches on defense, because of the culture and the identity that James Franklin has built at Penn State, and because of the fact that, listen, Manny Diaz isn't, in my opinion, a Brent Pry. He isn't an elite DC, but he's a great DC. There's a reason why he was the defensive coordinator for Miami under Mark Richt, and the reason he is the reason why Mark Richt didn't go out with a 3-9 year in his final season at Miami, where the offense was disgusting, but the defense was well more than serviceable. It was a good to great defense from, if my memory serves me correctly, of course. And you return a lot of starters. Like, again, Abdul Carter, Curtis Jacobs, who announced he was returning, Kalen King, in my opinion, one of the nation's better cornerbacks, actually came out of Michigan, out of high school. Johnny Dixon, Keaton Ellis, Daquan Hardy. You also got Storm Duck through the portal from North Carolina, who's transferring in at corner. So there will be depth added there. So this defense is mostly reloading, from my understanding. The offense, again, still returns the majority of this talent. I mean, I see Penn State minimum. I see them as a top 10 team. They're going to have easily a top 25 offense and defense next year. They'll probably easily be top 15 in both categories. I think they will be a better team this coming season than they were last season. And that is due to multiple things. It is due to a powerful run game headed by Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, which should only get better, especially with the returning production at offensive line. Penn State also, we're going to talk about their schedule here for a few minutes. They have, yes, a Power 5 non-conference game against the collection of homeless people that is West Virginia. And it's at home. Nothing to worry about there. Iowa, their toughest crossover game, is at home. Now, of course, they have a road matchup with Illinois the week before, but Illinois loses a lot, and I can guarantee you they are not going to overlook that team because that team 2 years ago walked into Beaver Stadium and beat them. Whether it's due to Penn State, obviously having momentum and carrying it into next season, whether it's the veterancy of this team, whether it's the fact that a lot of their tougher matchups are at home. They also host Michigan. You're not traveling to the big house. You travel to Michigan State, Maryland, Ohio State, Northwestern, and Illinois in conference, but Northwestern shouldn't be any good. Illinois loses a lot. Maryland, come on. Maryland only beat Penn State in 2020. They haven't come close to beating them since. Michigan State, unless they get another player like Kenneth Walker, I don't see how they're going to beat a team like Penn State or Ohio State, or dare I say it, even Michigan, unless Michigan, Penn State, or Ohio State have a ridiculously down year, the toughest game is at Ohio State. And they lose CJ Stroud, they lose some other players, but overall Ohio State mostly reloads, but they do have a favorable schedule if you exclude the ever yearly matchup with either at Ohio State or at Michigan they have. In my opinion, they have a pretty favorable schedule that they, with the talent they have, can manage. And Manny Diaz's defense, like I said, they return a lot of starters. They return a lot of depth. Penn State is, again, recruiting extremely well. It's not just on defense either. It's all over the field. Their two best signees in the 2023 recruiting class, Jevin Williams and Alex Birchmeier, they're offensive linemen. So in the trench play too, Penn State's realizing that, hey, this thing where Ohio State and Michigan have infinitely better trench play than we do, can't have that if we want to win the college football playoff. So Penn State, I think they have an opportunity for 2023. I think a lot of people realize this. I think, guys like Josh Pate realize this. I think that multiple sports writers and news outlets recognize Penn State as this dark horse college football playoff contender. Many have them as a unanimous top 15 team. I'll tell you right now, I have Penn State as a top 5 team. My way too early top 25, once I've done adequate research for all Power 5 teams, like just decent research for every Power 5 team, I will release that. Penn State will, I guarantee you, will be at minimum top 8 in that, if anything changes. And right now, I don't think they will fall any lower than 6. This team is destined to, I think, at minimum, win 9-10 regular season games. That's at minimum. That's like the floor of this team. I don't know if I can see them beating both Michigan and Ohio State, but I know they can certainly beat one of them. And knowing that Penn State and Beaver Stadium and Penn State on the road are two different teams, if they are going to beat one of those teams, it is more likely than not going to be Michigan, of course, who James Franklin does have a better record against than he does against Ohio State as well. But there are really just, a lot of different factors. Can they reach the college football playoff? Absolutely. But here is how they can do it. You need Drew Allar to play top tier football. Now, Drew Allar playing top tier football, I don't think makes him the best quarterback in the Big Ten. It's going to be his first year as a full-fledged starter. From what I've seen, just him in action, I don't think, comparing things at a similar level, I think J.J. McCarthy and Kyle McCord as freshmen were better than Drew Allar as a freshman. But granted, that might be because Drew Allar had a worse offensive line, probably had a worse supporting cast, and honestly has a worse head coach than the two of them do, at least comparing the freshman careers of Drew Allar, J.J. McCarthy, and Kyle McCord. I think that if Drew Allar plays his best football, his ceiling is probably capped at the second best quarterback in the Big Ten, which, heck, is still really good with the fact that their running back room can contend for being the best in the Big Ten, and the fact that they return a lot of experience, not just on the side of the ball that Drew Allar will be managing and leading and playing at, but also the other side of the football as well. Allar threw for 344 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had a 60 QBR, had a 128.5 passer rating. He had 18 rushing attempts, too, for 52 yards, averaged 2.9 yards per carry. He had 1 touchdown pass, and he had 3 sacks on the year. He played in a total of 10 games, according to ESPN's game log. I'm telling you, he is one of the main prerequisites for Penn State reaching the college football playoff. I think he's going to have to play like 2016, 2017 Trace McSorley level of QB play. So by that I mean better and more likely than not, much better than how Sean Clifford played this past season, which was honestly above average to good QB play. He's going to have a great year. The offensive line, I know they return the majority of their production, but losing your center is huge. Just look at how Iowa's O-line absolutely fell off the rails when Tyler Linderbaum left for the NFL, though I'm not saying Drew Scruggs is Tyler Linderbaum material, but you get the point. The center's important, and Drew Scruggs was a constant for a Penn State O-line that was just hampered by injuries. The offensive line is going to have to step up. It was at one point viewed as a finalist for the Joe Moore Award, then the Michigan-Ohio State game happened, and that dream died. But it's a new year, a new season. That offensive line is going to have to improve and play at a level that we have not seen from Penn State in a long time. And honestly, a level that we probably haven't seen at all in the James Franklin era. QB play and O-line play have to go up. Another one is that the defense cannot perform in a manner that they did in Ann Arbor last year. That defense is, to me, when I saw that, the first thing I thought of is that's a Manny Diaz defense when the big games show around. Like Alabama in 2021, where Miami's defense looked helpless against John Mechie and Jamison Williams. A defense that Manny Diaz was the head coach and the DC. He coordinated that defense, just as he did in 2022 against Michigan. The difference is, of course, wasn't a head coach, so you have less distractions, and Alabama's receiver room in 2021 was like Michigan's running back room in 2022. It's one of the best in the nation. It's going to be hard to stop. I mean, even Georgia couldn't stop that wide receiver core when it was healthy in 2021, but you cannot allow 400 rushing yards. And that more so has to do with defensive trench play and defensive front seven play. You cannot get manhandled. You can't do it. Maybe even more important than Drew Allar playing exceptional football, or not exceptional, but at least great football, is the trench play. If you have exceptional trench play, then, as Cade McNamara in Michigan showed in 2021, you do not have to have a great quarterback. You can have a good quarterback. But part of the issue, again, is that Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, at least when you include offensive and defensive trench play, have historically, in the past several years, had better overall trench play than Penn State does. The difference is Penn State has traditionally had the edge over Michigan in QB play. Sean Clifford, Trace McSorley, on average, have been better than, adding up John O'Korn, Shea Patterson, and Wilton Spate. So there's a lot of things going for Penn State, but I think trench play, I think QB play, and I think wide receiver play too, because losing Parker Washington and Mitchell Tinsley those are two big losses right there. You're losing an NFL wide receiver and a wide receiver who in 2021 was close to leading the nation in several categories in Mitchell Tinsley. But above all else, mental toughness, cohesiveness, keeping the culture together. Penn State, they won 11 games. They were in 12 of those games. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that off of their fluke plays in Ann Arbor that they were ever in that Michigan game. They weren't. It was a mirage, but they were in that Ohio State game. They were. So finishing out, playing all 4 quarters, that perhaps, as all of us know, is going to be the biggest determining factor for any James Franklin team, as it has been for any Harbaugh team. So, and look, from Michigan fan angle, Jim Harbaugh's done it. And after 2020, and more so after 2019 and 2018, I don't know why Michigan was picked to go to the CFP in 2019, like in the 2019 preseason. But Jim Harbaugh, it took him several years to get there. James Franklin has built together a staff that's impressive, a roster that's impressive. Penn State's consistently recruiting at a top 15, top 10 level. getting several 5 stars and highly ranked 4 stars. Penn State can reach the college football playoff. There's no doubt about that. The question is, will they? And in my opinion, you got to have great QB play. You got to have great trench play. Your wide receivers have to be good. And you got to have mental toughness. And excluding mental toughness, you can afford to not have one of them, but that puts all the more pressure on those other positions. If Drew Allar plays on average like how Sean Clifford played throughout his entire career, your O-line and D-line and wide receiver rooms are going to have to be exceptional and great to get Penn State to access their first college football playoff ticket. That's all I have to say in this video. Again, if you liked it, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Again, before I end this video off, Penn State's schedule is West Virginia, Delaware, at Illinois, Iowa, at Northwestern, UMass, at Ohio State, Indiana, at Maryland, Michigan, Rutgers. They close out the year against Michigan State. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.